I've been enjoying the product of All Elite Wrestling for over 3 years. I have been enjoying culture of pro wrestling for over 20 years. Anyone can like or dislike the AEW product. It's very subjective opinion after all. As you can see, my subjective taste leaves me as a big mark for AEW. But that doesn't make me delusional about their product. It's not like I can't entertain the idea of something being objectively bad or good. After being part of internet wrestling community, I noticed a lot of tribalism. There are people who enjoy AEW and want to share their opinions about it, as well as I noticed a lot of people hating their product, to the point they often just say it is objectively bad product. It's fine if you don't enjoy it, just say you don't enjoy it, while calling something awful is a statement. You're being a critic. If you review a product, you must not rely on your subjective feelings, as feelings just apply to selective person, which is yourself. As feelings just apply to selective person, which is yourself, it is hard to compare individual taste when discussing overall quality of a product. Which is why when you critique something, you must understand being a real critic is not easy. You have to entertain the fact that you may be incorrect. You can analyze your bias comparing it to objective facts, but that is as far as you can go with your subjectivity. Point I'm trying to make here is that on the internet wrestling communities, there will always be people playing critics, while all they do is just leave subjective opinions equal to giving something a thumbs up or thumbs down. If you want to add something, you must leave your individual taste behind and dive deep into objectivity. I firmly believe to discuss quality for any form of art, we have to start from common ground. I would suggest before watching this video to ask yourself, what do you think matters most in wrestling? It must be story, right? As the action we get to see only enhances the story told, and what matters in a good story? Leaving subjective opinions far away, we can agree that all fiction starts from a script. And that script, to really touch you personally, have to introduce the story in a correct way. The script can't be all over the place, leaving important details out. Instead of and then storytelling, I believe it has to be more of this happened because that happened, and that happened because of other things happening. And other things happen for a reason that either is clear to us or is intriguing and can be explained by the content itself. Basically, a good script has to have good continuity. The best stories take us through journey of a protagonist together. We can see the protagonist develop without breaking consistent characteristics. And as for pro wrestling goes, it once was a con, and the rabbit got out of the hat, and now pro wrestling in order to survive has to rely on quality story instead of focusing only on pantomime. So basically the in-ring performance, the moves performed by wrestlers are just action, attraction that draws our attention while the characters themselves must tell the story. We need to know basic characteristics to be invested. And people complain about acrobatics in wrestling as if it wouldn't have any story behind it. This is not AW booking mentality, and my video here is to elaborate on this point. After seeing so much of negativity towards a product, I tried entertaining the critique, play devil's advocate, and only after try to debate it, just to see if there's any solid ground behind the critique. And what I notice, people often compare company AEW to another company called WWE, as they have a lot of similarities. Both are TV shows using vast culture of pro wrestling, both trying to follow the conservative rules that worked before and now are considered valid points of what pro wrestling's supposed to be. Ignore the ratings, they can't reflect the quality of a product, as what I will try to judge here is storytelling. Any action only adds to the story, well, if it's applied well. Otherwise, it might end up taking away from the story, leaving us detached from its plot. Let's say EW does a Spot Fest. If you don't know what is a Spot Fest, let me elaborate. Spot Fest is when there is no in-ring psychology, just move after move. Amazing acrobatics feats performed for the sake of doing something impressive instead of telling a good story. AW does spots, and I'm sure there is ton of criticism of them overdoing it, while of course I would argue they are doing it right. So what I will do, I will take one character, give examples of spots with that character, and explain why those spots are adding to the story being told without taking anything away from it. And for spots, they are necessary in pro wrestling as not everyone immediately goes to pro wrestling for story. They don't know what pro wrestling is and what to look forward to when watching it. Maybe it's their first time watching a match. So in that case, any spot is there to attract their attention. Think of it as a car crash. Car crash will draw our attention while good story will keep us invested. Now if we manage to create balance between the car crash events and story, we hit the jackpot. AEW booking mentality is really complex. Instead of telling one big story like any movie does, AEW gives us individual characters going over their individual stories. And as it is a breathing world, different characters meet, create interactions, relationships, and create separate stories. When two wrestlers meet in AEW, we get three stories immediately. One story for each wrestler's individual journey, and one story for their relationship and interactions between both wrestlers. Now, if we know what story beats AEW is going for, we can start analyzing what is important in the whole interaction between two wrestlers going against each other. It is important that both wrestlers stay consistent, as consistency keeps us from being detached. We know where the story is going as we know each character. We can discuss and predict the outcomes without having to be mind readers. And when we are right about the outcome, we feel rewarded for following the story. If one character stops being consistent, the story of their relationship becomes less predictable. Not in a good way, it's unpredictable because it doesn't make sense. Any new trait coming out of nowhere gives us a feeling of being cheated, making our effort of following the story less relevant, and that keeps us less attached to small details. Shocking turns are great, but they are shocking not because we did not predict it or expected it. They are shocking because the story told was interesting and complex. Keeping consistent characters while managing their growth development gives us breathing world, and then it's not static, it's more personal as we can see these characters live and change. Any interactions, decisions, outcomes have consequences, making anything more important immediately because of the consequences. In wrestling, everything moves fast. Sometimes it's hard to let characters breathe. So we need to let viewers get used to specific traits, get more time to understand the present, which is where the pacing is very important. Some people call the pacing long-term booking. It's like when you plan ahead. For example, two wrestlers having a feud, which have been planned year ahead, so we would have that big match. But it's important to build towards it. While pro wrestling is filled with different unique styles of characters, as it is a competition between artists, it makes sense that not everyone will go the same road to gather our attention. Pro wrestling also has to have what I like to call power levels. There must be a reason for one guy beating other, and it has to be established by giving characters specific tasks to complete. Maybe it's overcoming weaknesses or learning from mistakes, or maybe it's a circumstantial luck that they had to get to be in the place they are now. This is where individuals work as a team. They have to dance with each other, enhance each other's story, be part of each other's character development. It all still comes to how well a character is defined. Maybe character 1 is losing the match because he lost his way, got overconfident, or not confident enough. That doesn't make his opponent immediately stronger, as he did not overcome as big of a challenge if he would have faced the character 1 at his peak. Maybe from there the character 2 who just beat character 1 can start overlooking the importance of never underestimating his opponent, as he found it too easy to beat someone he thought would be his biggest challenge. And what that would do, it would add overconfidence to his character trait. I love analyzing pro wrestling as there's so much to discuss about this entire culture. But the point of today's video is to address the critics of AEW. I will address one point they make, as I can't address everything in one video. I find it more simple this way. Sorry for the quality of the sound on this video. This is my lack of finances and management of it. I use pretty basic headphones with microphone on it. I hope this will not be too big of an issue, as I do want to address this topic and share it with all of you. I will be fair, I will be judging the critique, and you're welcome to add to this conversation. Maybe I will get enough feedback to do a follow-up on this topic, or you can as well leave other critique you have on AEW product. Just remember, subjective critique is basically a thumbs up or thumbs down. It can lead to interesting conversation, but has no place for a real debate here. This is why I want to have a common ground upon which we will start this commentary. Story is the most important part of pro wrestling for the audience. If you don't agree with this point, I think it will be hard to follow my critique of a critique. Alright, let's begin. The critique I am addressing today is that Jon Moxley bleeds too often. The point of it is that bleeding too much takes away from big moments, the blood is overused and loses the impact. If I'm not being fair for this argument, please let me know in the comment section down below. From what I've seen, this is the biggest complaint about blood of Moxley. That Moxley bleeds too much and it doesn't add anything. In fact, it takes away from the impact it could give. And I completely disagree. I will start by saying it's unfair to compare apples to oranges. Both are food, just different type of fruit. Why I say this? It's because what is blood? Or should I say, what is bleeding in a match? Is it not part of a story being told? I know. There's also a point being made about overusing it to the point it loses impact. Don't worry, I will get to that as well. To begin, I will have to address what Jon Moxley is as a character. We got the debut of Jon Moxley when he attacked Kenny Omega. Was it just the biggest attraction they could give us at that point? Well, yes. But what did it told us about Moxley? Moxley attacked the guy who we looked at as a top guy in the company. Moxley wanted to be on top. Taking out the top guy is the way to do it. Ambitious indeed, overconfident, maybe. At the point we couldn't say, as he did beat Kenny Omega, but we have to look at the way Moxley beat Omega. But before that, we have to look at the tactics Moxley applied before the match. In the build to the match, Moxley was wild and throwing Omega off a pretty high poker chip to the floor. Later on, Moxley gave promos about how he is in AEW to be on top and how anyone, no matter how much respect Moxley had for them, before the match ends, they are considered his enemies. And no matter what, Moxley will come after them. This is how Moxley intimidate. He plays mind games. He's definitely not a stupid person. He knows that Kenny Omega is far more athletic than him. He knows if it's a simple singles match, Moxley would be in a far more danger. So there would be a big reason for Moxley versus Omega match to be a no-holds-barred match, also known as a lights-out match. It had to be a fight, not just a match. There was no respect given, only disrespect. Luring Omega to the dark place, agreeing to have a no-holds-barred match, as at that time Omega had to prove himself and was easily influenced or even manipulated. People behind Omega, they were not exactly the best type. They filled Omega with overconfidence, as we did saw him as one of the best wrestlers and believed he could beat Moxley in Moxley's favorable environment. That would also prove a point in the star dominance of Omega. So Moxley wasn't dumb. He knew how to push right buttons, how to intimidate, how to get to the match that he has more experience in. This is important part of his character and his power level. Moxley is not the best wrestler, but he's really tough, and his offense is really strong. He has devastating finishing moves and endurance to withstand trading blows with anyone. His style could be called a brawler. Well, that's before he adapted, as any smart guy would. Moxley loves to intimidate and can withstand insane amounts of pain. He told everyone pain keeps him in shape and right mental mind for a fight and the outcome he needs. He will break your spirit, allow you to trade blows with him, proving how much insignificant your offense is on him. This is where Moxley could be called reckless. In the AEW environment, he's the wild dog. He just wants to be on top as that will provide more money to his family. He has enough confidence in himself to keep going, while his methods back up his claim of being the best. He lost only 5 times in his AEW run so far for a reason. Others need to adapt to him, as he's the monster we need to survive. And this was before he started learning more technical style of wrestling with Blackpool Combat Club. So basically, his reckless style and intimidation tactics leave him open for attacks. He has strong offense while big lack of defense. It is still enough skills to prove Moxley can be champion, and not to say Moxley doesn't love to challenge himself. His first AEW title defense was against amateur wrestler Jake Hager to prove to everyone Moxley is not just a brawler who needs a weapon to win. The match itself against Jake Hager was a huge challenge for Moxley. He at that time still had lack of experience in normal rule matches, as his style did him no favors. But Moxley is that kind of tough. He will overcome the challenge he puts on himself to fill in his confidence and focus on adapting to his competition. This is why we see Moxley bleed when facing tough opponents. It's not like Moxley bleeds when he faces guys like Nakazawa or Brandon Cutler. He basically left them in a bloody pulp. Also, do you notice how Moxley comes through the crowd instead of using the entrance ramp? It's because he doesn't trust anyone. Have to watch his back, as his methods of getting on top draws a lot of enemies. Firstly, Moxley used the entrance ramp until he got attacked by Pac. Pac hit him from behind with a chair. That was the last time Moxley used the entrance ramp. Moxley adapts to his environment. He notices the fear of his opponents. He knows how to play mind games before the match, which is where his persona of wild dog comes from. Moxley hides his true emotions from everyone, not allowing people to get close. Only people he had close relationships with was people who he knew before AEW was a thing. Only them know who Moxley really is. For example, Eddie Kingston. Their story is really interesting. The Mad King, never good enough to be on top, has to claw his way to the top by stabbing his friend. Moxley knew him, and he knew his mother. They were close friends. When Eddie started feuding with Mox is when we saw more emotional Moxley. They had a brutal match filled with blood because that was an environment where they excelled at. They were in a match called I Quit. You have to say you quit, say it out loud. And both Eddie and Moxley are type of characters you don't believe you can hear them say it out loud. The violence was necessary, and it tore Moxley's heart knowing how much he will have to hurt Eddie, his close friend. Even when Eddie was acting mad, completely ignoring the fact Moxley was ever his friend, Moxley felt sorry for him, and the blood in that match showed how both of them suffer for the goal of being a champion, putting over the championship and the meaning behind being on top in the industry this competitive, this violent. Moxley had a title defense against MJF, where MJF out wrestled him. It wasn't a no disqualification match. Moxley had to wrestle, and MJF showed how much better he was than Mox when it comes to technical wrestling. While of course Moxley continued his offense and never gave up his attitude. Moxley really struggled, he took a lot of damage but he still won, showing how enough toughness and spirit can keep him on top. Slight changes to Moxley's moveset came when he started using chokes, STFs, and figure 4 leg locks. He adapted, as submissions gave him tough challenge. Like now, Moxley trains with Claudio Castagnoli, Wheeler Yuta, Bryan Danielson, surrounding himself with people who can help him adapt. But at that time, before Blackpool Combat Club, Moxley, even while adapting, kept his offense and lack of defense, as it was the method that kept him on top. It also allowed him to cut bloody promos after matches, putting fear into his opponents. I will show a short clip of what is a bloody Moxley promo. Him bleeding makes sense by knowing what he is.
Yeah, I can taste it. Taste like victory. It tastes like life. And that's what I'm all about. Living my life to the fullest. I've said it before. I am a sick man. I do this because I like it. All right? It is not something to be proud of. It is not something to aspire to. I live for this. I'm not the kind of guy you want to go down a dark alley with when there's only one of us coming out. You are not the same animal as me! And there is only room for one of these animals in AEW. Only room for one animal like me in this ecosystem. And I will die to protect what's mine.
I don't want to do entire essay on Moxley's AEW story as that could fit entirely different video, as there's a lot of very interesting development in Moxley's journey. Moxley is a complex character and everything he does is part of him, part of what will be involved in stories others encounter, and part of his own personal story. I think I made my point about AEW having consistent characters organically growing over their individual stories, but my point of this video is to address the critique of Moxley bleeding too much. Point of overusing blood loses the impact of blood. To debate that, question I give to you is what is the purpose of having impact? I would say any impact is there to enhance the story. Now this is where apples and oranges come, as Moxley bleeding in most of his tough encounters is part of his story. It enhances the story of who Moxley is. One day, we might stop seeing Moxley bleed that much, but it depends if he moves away from his macho attitude and reckless style of intimidation. In the end, the blood is part of a bigger picture. If you watch Moxley being busted open, barking about how he enjoys it, how he is a different animal than anyone else, it's Moxley we're seeing. Moxley is excellent at playing his part. I believe what Moxley is, even while knowing this is just an act. Blood enhances it. Moxley not bleeding might be a special moment. While Moxley bleeding has a purpose, it's a part of who Moxley is. If Moxley stops bleeding in big matches, it means Moxley already improved his technical style to the point it's his main offense. And also it would mean his personality shifted. He became less wild and more calm and disciplined. Like Claudio Castagnoli. Anyone who just repeats this argument of Moxley bleeding too much ignores the fact what is the purpose of bleeding, what is the purpose of memorable, what is the purpose of impactful. It all comes down to story. And Moxley has excellent story. Blood is part of it. Here we go. I think I did pretty good job in defense of AW. If you want to give me feedback, add to this conversation, or raise any new topic where you want to dive deep to AW analysis, just let me know in the comments. I'm very interested in what you have to say after you watch my video. I'm a bit tired of people jumping to tribalism. I will admit I belong to AW tribe as I don't watch WWE. I also have my feelings towards WWE, but that is a separate discussion. I've been a long-time viewer of their product and I see a clear difference in a booking mentality. I mean it when I say AW is alternative product, and only thing it has in common with WWE is that it's part of pro wrestling culture. My subjective opinion on WWE will be controversial, so it's better for everyone if I don't talk about it at all. While everyone are welcome, I will not hate you for hating me or AEW. Just be civil and don't harass people enjoying the product. Basically, be adults about it. Thank you for spending your time, and I hope it wasn't too hard to understand me and my broken English. Have a nice day.